families, neighbors. This is a Homefront, a woman's reflection. We've heard so much about the frontline workers and what they're doing. We appreciate them for that. I don't think we've heard so much about how the women are managing the Homefronts. And today we want to bring to you a reflection, the woman's reflection. And with us today, we have a very dear friend of ours, Shamila Opaloa. She's a wife, a mother. She works from home. She's going to give us her reflections on how she's been able to manage a home with two little boys and a husband and a work to face. And she's also going to tell us what God has done at a time like this through this pandemic and reflect on everything. Relax, stay with us, and be blessed. Amen.
Cool.
Hello, everyone. What I'm going to be doing today is speaking about and reflecting on the current situation that we're in, the lockdown situation, and the situation we're coming out of by God's grace, which is the global pandemic. In reflecting on this, I think I'll start with when I heard that we would potentially have to stay at home for a number of weeks, and this is something that was potentially quite exciting for me because the thought of not having to do the daily commute, being able to work from home, is something that I welcomed. It's something that would make my life, I thought, a lot easier. However, as the lockdown progressed and went beyond the first couple of weeks, it became apparent that it was a lot more serious than initially anticipated. Now, when I talk about the home front, I think the key thing there is discovering this whole notion of homeschooling for my entire life as a parent, which is approximately 5 years. That's something that's typically been outsourced to a nursery or the school, and I've done parts of it, but having to homeschool the children was something that was quite interesting and somewhat of a challenge, but I really enjoyed knowing more about my children's personalities, discovering their little quirks and things that I don't typically see because I'm at work and they're at school or in nursery. So this was initially so much fun, having family time, which is something I really value because it's not something that I get a lot of. Was initially fun, but as things progressed, there was a lot of pressure. I believe the media coverage and the pressure of watching the news daily and hearing the number of deaths going up week on week, day on day, was really heart-wrenching. And I think as it came closer to home and I was hearing stories of friends that were in hospital fighting the coronavirus and family members that were in hospital fighting the coronavirus, there was certainly an element of fear and a desire to protect my family from that fear that I was feeling, but also knowing that I had to go on doing everything that I was doing. So I had to go on with work. I had to go on with being a wife and a parent, something that was initially quite overwhelming. I would say that there was also a real challenge around hearing so much bad news, hearing about the uncertainty around jobs and hearing about people losing their jobs, which was absolutely heart-wrenching, and then sows a seed of uncertainty in my own mind around how are we going to cope, what do we do if either one of us loses our job. So it was, and I think to a lesser extent now, but at the peak of the pandemic, I was gripped with fear, I was gripped with anxiety, I was gripped with just complete uncertainty, but I had to go on, keep showing up to the office every day, keep trying to do as good a job as I can, and keep being there for my family, and being able to inspire the children was really challenging. And one of the things that I sat down and I realized at the midst of my fear, or rather at the peak of my fear and the peak of my anxiety, was that people were going through this season not having Jesus and not having that hope. And at a time, I realized that actually I do have Jesus, I do have this hope, I do have this anchor that I can lean on. And so the scripture that came to me was in Hebrews 4:15 to 16, that we don't have a high priest who isn't aware of our weaknesses, who hasn't been where we've been, but Jesus completely understands. And having Jesus there, and actually maybe moving away from the media and focusing on prayer and focusing on the promises that God has given me, knowing that he'll be with me in the fire, he'll be with me in the flood, it really took away this feeling of fear, this feeling that I had to protect my children from knowing about this pandemic. I understood that they really don't belong to me but belong to him. Um, and I feel like this pandemic actually pushed me from making excuses around why I didn't have time to pray, why I didn't have time to read my Bible, but it made me understand that these things were really important, and I couldn't skip a day, and I couldn't, you know, try and look for anything, or look for peace, look for reassurance. I couldn't look for it in the news. I couldn't look for it in other people who were feeling just like me. So I had to go back to my first love. I had to go back to Jesus and really depend on him in this season. So in concluding, I would say my reflection is that it's been challenging, going through this pandemic, being in lockdown. It's been hard. It's required resilience. It's required faith, and I'm thankful for my faith that has enabled me to come out of this relatively unscathed, and I'm really grateful for Jesus Christ and the promises that he has given us in his word, that we can stand on and we can hold on to despite everything that's happening around us. So those are some of my reflections on going through the pandemic, being a wife, being a mother, being a woman in this season. And I hope that you're blessed, and I hope that you really understand the valuable relationship and that you have with Jesus, and the role that your faith plays in the day-to-day things, and how much Jesus cares about those small little fears and nagging worries that you have, and the promises, the wealth of promises that he has given you to be able to lean on and to believe in despite anything that's happening around you.